My neighbor built a 12-foot mirror fence to cook my tomatoes. So I used physics to melt her shed. The glare was blinding. It wasn't just bright, it was a physical assault on my retinas, a searing white light that pierced through the curtains of my living room and illuminated the dust motes dancing in the air like radioactive particles. I squinted, shielding my eyes with my hand as I walked to the window. It was 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. The sun shouldn't be hitting this side of the house until noon. I pulled back the blackout curtain, an investment I had been forced to make 3 days ago, and looked outside. There it was. The Monolith. My neighbor, Mrs. Higgins, had outdone herself. After 14 failed HOA complaints about my unsightly tomato cages and aggressive cucumber vines, she had decided to go nuclear. Or rather, she had decided to go chrome. Running the entire length of our shared property line was a 12-foot-tall fence. But it wasn't wood. It wasn't vinyl. It was polished aluminum panels with a mirror finish so flawless you could shave in it from 50 feet away. It was a spite fence. A literal wall of reflection designed to do two things: block the sunlight from my prize-winning heirloom tomatoes, effectively starving them to death, and bounce the morning sun directly into my living room, turning my home into a convection oven. Beautiful day, isn't it, John? Mrs. Higgins was standing on her deck, wearing oversized sunglasses and a wide-brimmed hat, sipping iced tea. She looked like a lizard basking on a rock. She was enjoying the heat. She was enjoying the fact that I was squinting. "It's bright, Brenda," I called back, my voice tight. "Did you really need the mirror finish?" "It's a hazard." "It's architectural chrome," she corrected me, smirking. The HOA approved it. Modern aesthetics, they said. "If it bothers you, maybe you should close your blinds. Or move." "It's cooking my tomatoes," I said, pointing to the wilting vines that were already drooping under the intense, reflected heat. "Maybe you shouldn't grow farm food in a residential zone," she sniffed. "Tomatoes belong in a field. Or a can. Not next to my pool." I stared at her. I looked at the fence. I looked at the slight, almost imperceptible curve in the cheap metal panels where the installer hadn't tightened the bolts enough. Mrs. Higgins thought she had built a wall. She didn't know she had built a primary optical element. I turned around and walked back into my house. I didn't get angry. I didn't call the HOA. I went to my study and pulled out a dusty leather case from the bottom drawer of my desk. Inside was a slide rule, a protractor, and a scientific calculator. I am a retired optics engineer. I spent 40 years designing lenses for telescopes, lighthouses, and high-energy laser systems. I know how light behaves. I know that the angle of incidence equals the angle of reflection. And I know that a curved reflective surface doesn't just bounce light. It focuses it. I sat down at my desk. I pulled up the solar azimuth charts for our latitude. March 4th was approaching. The sun would be at a specific angle at exactly 1:15 p.m. I started sketching. The fence wasn't flat. It was bowed. Concave. That meant it had a focal point. But the focal point was messy. It was scattered. To make it dangerous, to make it effective, I needed to clean up the signal. I needed to refine the beam. I looked at my second-story windows. They faced the fence directly. If I applied a high reflectivity film to those windows, but not just flat. If I used spacers to create a slight curvature, I could turn my windows into a secondary mirror. A sub-reflector. I could bounce the sunlight from my window to her fence, and then, where would it go? I traced the ray path on the paper. Line A bounces to surface B focuses to point C. I looked at a satellite map of her yard. Point C wasn't the pool. It wasn't the patio. Point C was directly in the center of her brand new, indestructible resin composite designer shed. The shed where she stored her gasoline cans and her riding mower. "Gotcha," I whispered. I went to the hardware store. I bought a roll of platinum mirror window tint. $5. I bought a sheet of clear acrylic. I spent the next 2 days building my passive energy-saving window inserts. They looked innocent. Just shiny windows. But the geometry was precise to within a millimeter. Tuesday, March 4th. I installed the panels at 9 a.m. Mrs. Higgins watched me from her yard. "More trash on the house, John," she yelled. "Going for the tinfoil hat look?" "Just saving energy, Brenda," I called down. "Trying to reflect some of this heat you're sending me." "Good luck," she laughed. I went inside. I checked my calculations. The sun moved across the sky. 12 p.m. The light hit my window. 12:30 p.m. The reflection started to track across her yard. 1 p.m. The beam hit the fence. The fence, acting as the primary parabolic concentrator, took the already focused light from my window and tightened it. It compressed the photons into a beam of pure thermal energy. 1:15 p.m. I sat in my kitchen, eating a sandwich, watching the clock. I didn't look outside. I didn't need to. I knew the math was right. 1:20 p.m. I heard a sound. It wasn't a crash. It was a pop. Like a plastic bottle being squeezed. Then, a smell. Acrid. Chemical. Burning plastic. "Here we go," I said. I walked to the back door and peered through the screen. Smoke was rising from the shed. Not heavy black smoke, but wispy, gray tendrils that curled into the still afternoon air. The beige plastic siding of the Lifetime shed was glistening. It looked wet. It wasn't wet. It was liquefying. The beam of light hitting the center of the shed door was blindingly bright. It was a spotlight from heaven. The plastic was bubbling, sagging, dripping like wax down the front of the structure. The roof of the shed groaned. The structural supports were warping under the heat. It wasn't burning in flames yet, it was sublimating. The chemical bonds of the polymer were breaking down instantly. Mrs. Higgins ran out of her back door. She was wearing her bathrobe. She must have smelled it. "Fire," she screamed. "My shed. John. Call 911. I'm on it." I shouted back, picking up my phone. I dialed slowly. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a thermal event at 404 Oak Lane." "No, not a fire exactly." "A melting." "Yes, melting." Mrs. Higgins grabbed her garden hose. She turned it on. She sprayed the shed. Big mistake. The cold water hit the superheated plastic. Steam exploded outward. The sudden temperature shock caused the entire front wall of the shed to shatter. It crumbled inward, collapsing onto the riding mower stored inside. Crunch! The roof came down next. The entire structure folded like a cheap accordion. "My mower!" Brenda shrieked. "My tools!" She dropped the hose. The water kept running, pooling around the gray sludge that used to be her storage unit. But the beam of light didn't stop. The sun hadn't moved enough yet. The focal point shifted slightly as the shed collapsed. The beam bounced off the shiny, melted puddle of plastic. It angled upward. It shot through her kitchen window. I saw the flash. It illuminated her kitchen like a camera strobe. 10 seconds later, her house alarm went off. And then, the sound of rushing water. "My house!" Brenda screamed, running toward her back door. The beam had hit the thermal sensor of her automatic fire sprinkler system. Or maybe it just superheated the air in the kitchen enough to pop the glass bulb in the sprinkler head. Water was pouring from the ceiling inside her house. I could see it splashing against the window pane. It was a deluge. 400 gallons a minute of stale, rusty fire suppression water soaking her granite countertops, her custom cabinets, and her hardwood floors. She tried to open the door. It was locked. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them in the panic. "Help me," she wailed. I walked to the fence. I looked at the devastation. The shed was a puddle. The house was flooding. The fence, the chrome fence that started it all, stood tall and shiny, perfectly reflecting the chaos it had created. "I can't come over, Brenda," I said. "The fence is too high." The fire trucks arrived 5 minutes later. 2 engines. Sirens blazing. They cut the water to her house. They sprayed foam on the remains of the shed just in case the gas cans ignited. The fire marshal, a stern man named Captain Miller, walked around the backyard with a clipboard. He looked at the shed. He looked at the fence. He looked at my window. He walked over to me. "Sir," Miller said. "Did you see what happened?" "I did," I said. "I saw the light." "The light?" "Yes. It was intense." Miller squinted at my window. "Is that foil on your glass?" "Energy-saving film," I said. "High efficiency. Keeps the AC bill down." "And that fence?" Miller pointed to the chrome monstrosity. "New installation," I said. "Mrs. Higgins put it up last week. Architectural chrome. Very modern." Miller looked at the fence. He looked at the angle of the sun. He looked at the melted shed. He started to chuckle. He covered his mouth with his hand, but his shoulders shook. "She built a solar oven," Miller muttered. "A parabolic concentrator," I corrected him gently. "Technically." Miller walked over to Brenda, who was wrapped in a blanket, shivering, watching the firefighters squeegee water out of her living room. "Ma'am," Miller said, "we've determined the cause of the fire. Or, the melt. It was him." Brenda pointed a shaking finger at me. "He did something. He has lasers. He's an engineer." "He has window tint, ma'am," Miller said. "You have a 12-foot mirror in your backyard." "It's a fence." "It's a reflective surface," Miller explained. "The sun hit his window, bounced to your fence, and your fence focused the beam onto your shed. It's simple physics. Ray tracing." "That's impossible," she shrieked. "My fence didn't do this. He aimed it." "He didn't move the sun, ma'am," Miller said dryly. "And you installed the primary reflector. In a residential zone. Without a thermal impact study." "A what?" "You built a structure capable of generating extreme heat," Miller said, his voice hardening. "That's a code violation. Creating a hazardous condition. We're going to have to cite you." "Cite me?" Brenda gasped. "My house is flooded. My shed is gone. And you're fining me?" "You created the hazard," Miller shrugged. "And frankly, you're lucky the gas cans didn't explode. That would have taken out the whole block." I walked inside and grabbed a folder from my desk. I walked back out. "Officer," I said, "I have some documentation that might help." I handed him the diagram. The ray trace. The calculations showing the focal length of the bowed fence panels. Miller looked at it. "You did the math?" "I was worried about my tomatoes," I said. I tried to warn her. I told her it was a hazard. She told me to close my blinds. Miller showed the diagram to Brenda. "He knew." Brenda yelled. "He knew it would happen. He let it happen." "He warned you," Miller said. "You ignored him." "That's negligence, ma'am." The insurance adjuster came out 2 days later. I was gardening, my tomatoes were recovering nicely under a shade cloth I had installed, when he walked over to the fence. "Mr. John?" the adjuster asked. "Yes. I'm investigating the claim for 402. Did you witness the event?" "I did." "Is it true you warned the policyholder about the reflective danger?" "I told her it was a hazard," I said. "On Tuesday. She told me to move." The adjuster nodded. He wrote something down. And the fence, is it true she installed it specifically to reflect light into your home? She called it modern aesthetics, I said. But she also said she hoped it would cook my vegetables. Intentional act, the adjuster muttered. Creating a nuisance. He denied her claim. He cited gross negligence and installation of hazardous structures. Because she installed a non-standard fence material without a safety survey, and because she ignored a warning about the danger, the insurance company refused to pay for the shed or the water damage in the house. Brenda was on the hook for everything. The shed, $3,000. The mower, $4,000. The water damage restoration, $25,000. The fence removal, ordered by the city, $5,000. Total, $37,000. She tried to sue me. She filed a civil suit claiming I weaponized the sun. We went to court. I brought my diagrams. I brought my credentials. The judge looked at the math. He looked at the photos of the melted shed. Mr. John, the judge said. Did you install mirrors on your house? No, Your Honor. I installed window tint. Commercially available, energy-efficient tint. My windows are flat. Flat surfaces scatter light. Curved surfaces focus it. The defendant installed a curved, reflective fence. The fence was bowed, the judge asked. Cheap installation, I said. Bad brackets. Case dismissed, the judge ruled. Plaintiff failed to maintain her structure. Defendant utilized his property lawfully. Brenda had to sell the house to pay the debts. She moved out last month. The new neighbors are nice. They took down the chrome fence. They put up wood. Cedar. It smells good in the rain. I sent them a basket of tomatoes as a welcome gift. Heirloom, I told them. Sun ripened. They tasted like victory. So, tell me. Am I the monster for using physics to melt my neighbor's property, or did she just get burned by her own reflection?
If you have made it this far and want to see more videos like this, then kindly subscribe and turn on notifications so you may never miss another story like this.